First of all, thank you, Hashem. Exclusive our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. And Refuah Shlema for Yechiel Nassim ben Sarah and Aaron David Halevi ben Menucha the Lester. We're going to start Chav Zayin on the base 27b, right after the Mishnah. Yeah, the Mishnah had, if the shofar was cracked, or broken into pieces, shattered rather, and you put it back together, it's puzzle. If you blew into a pit and you're hearing the echo, that's a problem. And if you don't have kavana, it's a problem. That's the basic Mishnah. Tana Rabbanan. Taught in the Brisa. Aruch v'katzrei kasher. If the shofar was long, but you cut it down, it's kosher. It's no problem. It doesn't have to be its original size, that when you took it off the animal, as long as it's a shear, which we'll learn later what the shear is. Gardu v'amida al gilda is kasher. Let's say you sanded it down to make it very thin. That's kasher as well, as long as there's no hole in it. It doesn't have to be the same thickness that it was. Suppose of b'makam pez puzzle. Covered it with gold. If it's at the place of the lip, that's a problem. Like we said, that would be a chatzitza. He wouldn't be blowing a shofar, he's blowing some other mouthpiece. So if it's covered over with gold in different areas of the shofar as a decoration, that's fine. Suppose of mi bifnim. Let's say the gold was inside the shofar, the cavity of the shofar, plated inside. Puzzle mi bachutz. If you plated it outside, now it's going to depend. If the sound changed from its original sound because of that plating that you put on it, then it's puzzle. But if the sound is the same, then it's kosher. Okay. Yeah. They use these special wood for the guitar and all of that. It could be if you put a sticker on it or something, which some people may do, it could change the sound. It has to be the exact. Let's say there's a hole and then you sealed up the hole. Say it's puzzle. If now when you put in the what you filled it up with, how you sealed the hole, then it's gonna, if it affects the sound, then it's puzzle. If not, then it's kosher. Yeah, we said the Tosfos goes through a possible other pshat over here that maybe that the hole changed the sound before you filled it up, and now when you're filling it up, you're making like a different shofar, or it's a new shofar, it's two shofars or something, some other issue that you have. But in the end, I think this is the pshat, that if the filling affects the sound, not if the whole affected the sound. Nasan shofar b'teich shofar. If you put one shofar inside another shofar, I think what the Gemara means is that the lip of the shofar, you have two shofars at the end. So I could blow from the inside, I could blow larger from the outer. Okay, so both of them are right there at the edge, are right there at the mouthpiece.
Put your lips on it differently.
Yeah, a harmonica type of thing. Oh, very nice. So, im kol pnimi shama, if he ends up blowing the inner one, then he's yatsa. Im kol chitzin shama, but if he's blowing the outer one, then he's lo yatsa. And the problem with that is that the sound, you're blowing from two shofars then, because the sound is going in between the outer one and the inner one. As opposed to the inner one, it's only going through the inner one. If the outer one would affect the sound, that would be a problem, but we're assuming that it's not. It just happens to be in the middle. Tana Rabbanan was taught in a Brisa Garda, if he shaved it down, he sanded it down. It's kosher. Whether from the inside or from the outside, it's kosher. Garda v'amida al gilda. Let's say he shaved it down to the extent that there's just a very, very thin layer, the smallest possible layer possible. That's also kosher. The same thing. A shofar inside a shofar. If you hear the inner one, then you're hearing only one shofar. If you're hearing the outer one, then you're hearing the sound going between the two shofars. Let's say he turned it backwards. Now, la yatsa. He doesn't fulfill. Let's see what that means. Amar of Papa Leitem Kituna. Don't say that he turned it inside out like a shirt. Like you turn it, like a garment can be turned one way or another way. See, what happens is when you boil up the bone, the shayfer material, you boil it up, it gets soft, malleable. You can shape it however you want when it's soft. It's boiling hot, but you can shape it. So the Gemara is saying, don't say that you turned it inside out. It's funny that the Gemara doesn't tell me what the halacha is if you did turn it inside out. But he says, it says that you made the wide side narrow, the narrow side wide. Yeah, which is different than the way it's on the animal. By the way, when it's on the animal, it's attached on the wide side. Not by the point. So, my time, what's the problem? It needs to be the way that when you took the same way as you took it off. As you took it off the animal, it has to be that same wide and narrow. You can't change that. Otherwise, it's not kosher.
It's interesting he doesn't say the fact that if this is the shape of the shofar, if you squeezed and made this narrow and this wide, someone would pick it up and blow it from the wrong end, perhaps.
It may be that's the same. That's the same issue, that you're blowing it from the wrong end. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Dibik Shavri Shayfris Pasal, if you glued together, actually Rashi in French told me that the dibik is glued. Like I'm more impressed with the French and English. In French and English, it's the same glued. Yeah, I'm talking about the French. Rashi says French, glued. That's a French word. Yeah. So, if you glued it together, the broken pieces, it's puzzle. Tanar Rabbanan. Haisavalav Kalshu. Let's see you make an addition onto the shayfer. So, Bein B'mina, Bein Shleim Mina is puzzle. Whether it's from shayfer material or from any other material, paper mache or something. So, it's puzzle. Nikev. If you make a hole, v'sasmai, and then you seal it up, bein b'mina, bein shleim mina, it's puzzle. We didn't say that before. Before we said that if you seal a hole, it depends if it changed the sound. Reb Nassan says b'mina is kosher. If you use shayfer material to seal it up, it's kosher. Shleim b'mina, it's puzzle. But if you use other things to seal it up, hot glue, right? So then it would be puzzle. B'mina kosher. When it said that if you use shayfer material to seal it up, that's only if the hole is if it's mostly shayfer. It was just a small area that had a hole. That would imply that if you're using other material, is puzzle. Even though it's majority shayfer material, it's puzzle. There are those that said this on the sefer, which would be the opposite. Shlei b'mina is puzzle. We said that if you use other materials other than shayfer material, it's puzzle. When do we say it's puzzle? That's only if the majority of the shayfer is missing. There's a huge hole, huge gap. Michlal, the b'mina, that if it was using the correct material, shayfer material, to seal up the hole, afal pishin nefchas rubai is kosher. Even though it's the majority, it's kosher. In other words, you can make a shayfer with a hole, even though it's the majority of it. It's a big chiddush, but that only comes out according to the Ikadamri. Suppose avni b'fnim, if it's covered with gold from the inside, he said that's possible. But mibachutz, if it's on the outside, then then it depends if the sound changes from its original sound, then it's possible. But if the sound is the same, then it's kosher. If there's a split along its length, puzzle. According to Rashi, the split along its length meant that it was entirely split from the beginning to the end. In Shulchan Aruch, it's not like that. In Shulchan Aruch, it's even if there's a small split in the shofar, a small crack in the shofar, it's considered, I think it's based on a rivet, that it's the split will continue, and it's as if the whole thing is split. So a cracked shofar is like a big shiloh, because you have to look at which way it's split, and it's much more strict if it's split along the length of it. Oh, I don't know about that.
I'm sorry, there was a black shofar that was handed down for the Alter Rebbe to obey it, and it split either during the time of the Frierdiker Rebbe or until then it was used.
I didn't know about this. Reb Naftali is telling me about a black shofar that was handed down from the Rebbeim. L'reichbai, if it's along the width of it, so im nishtaya by shir tkiya, it's kasher. V'imlav pasal, you see, even if I'm going to view it that it's going to continue, so where did it split? If there's enough shofar left, let's say up here, there's a split in it. So what? So that part fell off. As long as I still have the shofar. What is the shir of the shofar? The kama shir tkiya. What's considered shir tkiya? Pirish Reb Shimon ben Gamliel kadesh yachzena biyadav v'yer lekan lekan. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says you hold it in your hand and you could see both ends. You could see the lip and you could see the wider part where the sound comes out. Yeah.
So it's better than a tefach.
Yeah. A drop more than a tefach. I think the Gemara calls it like a expanded tefach. The shear tefach sheichik, I think it's called in other places. Yeah. You can make a tiny shofar. I think it gets harder to blow though when it's smaller.
Does it depend, vary with the person's hands and the shofar?
Oh,
Like
that's a
we
good
once
question.
learned the big hand,
That's a good question.
so maybe one guy could blow if he has a small hand.
That's a very good question. Yeah, I would assume so. I would assume Dr. Stein is mentioning that it may have to do with each individual person. That's why it didn't say a sheer tefach. A tefach would have been a fixed measure. But over here it says just so you hold it in your hand. So it's approximately a tefach, but every person would be different. That makes sense.
Pun intended.
It's supposed to be. If the sound was very thin or it's very thick or it's very dry, it's kosher. Any sound that comes out of the shofar is good. Yeah. What about if it's just the sound of the wind, something that's just here, like that, but it's not really a shofar sound. It's more like
no vibration, just
right.
Because the vibration is what creates the sound.
Yeah, it can hear like that. Is that a sound of a shofar? It doesn't tell me. It's not saying. I mean, I need a sound of a shofar, but I don't. You follow? You hear what I'm asking?
It's not a tekiya. The original question was the kama shir tekiya.
Oh no, the interesting. Kamashir tekiya meant how long is the shofar? I don't know why it says that. I don't know why it calls it kamashir tekiya. What it meant was how long is the shofar. Now we're asking the sound of the. Now we're saying the sound of the shofar. It doesn't matter. Any sound is kosher. They ask Avua de Shmuel. This is Shmuel's father. Yeah, we don't know his name. I assume we don't know his name. He's called Shmuel's father. Kadchu v'takabai. Kadchu is you make a hole in it. The Gemara is assuming that a shofar always has a hole, so the Gemara is going to ask right away. But we're talking about the hole through the shofar for the sound to be to come through. So yatsa. Gemara says pshita. That's so obvious. Kulanami mikdach kadchulahu. Every shofar has a hole in it. You pull out there's like a marrow sort of material in the center of the shofar, and then the end of the shofar you have to drill, or you cut it off until you get up to the marrow. Yeah, you remove the marrow and then you drill the end. So we're saying, but you always drill the end. So Amar Ravashi should kadchu b'zachrusei. You didn't do it correctly, or you didn't do it the way everyone else does it. Everyone else does it is when they boil it up, the marrow just like pops out. What he did was he just drilled a hole straight through the marrow. So I could have thought that maybe, even though it's the same material as the shofar, I would say that it's a chatzitza, kamash malon, that it's no problem. So Avu the Shmuel tells us that you can just drill a hole straight through the marrow. You don't have to actually pull that out. Yeah. Yeah. When I taught 7th grade, we would make shofars, sandpaper and the drill, and we'd cut it off. I got them all like a handsaw. Let them like just cut it. The only question was every time cartilage. Really, that's what it's called, cartilage?
Yeah, because it's not really a bone. I'm just reading from here. These ones are not solid bone, but contain cartilage.
Who's writing that?
How to make a shofar.
Oh, you can't trust that.
I mean, I don't.
Rabana.
Yeah, in the yeshiva, I tell the bachim want to use the art scroll, because it's easy. But they're supposed to be learning without it. Yeah, even though it's much harder. But anyway, I tell them the only reason to look at the art scroll is to see if they got it right. No, but it has its purpose. Yeah. Okay.
I was looking for Google.
Oh, that's for sure nothing. As seen on Google. Okay. Someone blows into a pit or into a cistern. We said that would depend on if he's hearing this direct sound or if he's hearing the echo. Amar Rav Huna says, where would the problem be? The people that are outside the pit. Because the people outside the pit are hearing the sound of the echo. But if you're in the pit, then you don't have the echo. You have the direct sound. It's as it goes out of the pit where you're getting a confusion of sounds. Then this is actually a brisa. Rav Huna is explaining the Mishnah. He's adding a detail to the Mishnah. When the Gemara says Lo shanu ella, that's like the Mishnah saying Bamed Dvarim Amurim. Like in what case was those words said, right? Lo shanu ella, we have not learned only. That means it was only in this case. But we also have a brisa that says the same thing. Okay. And if you blow into a pit, you are yaitza. But we have a contradiction from a Mishnah that says la yatza. The Mishnah says that you're not yaitza. And elav shmamina k'Rav Huna shmamina. It's not the brisa that says it, but it's the contradiction, the brisa and the Mishnah, that the only way to resolve that is if we come along with Rav Huna's answer and say that it depends. If you're in the pit, you're yaitza. If you're out of the pit, you're not yaitza. Ikadaramilu mirma. There are those that pose this as a question, that it wasn't Rav Huna that came along and said, Lo shanu ella. It was a contradiction between a brisa and a Mishnah, and Rav Huna gives an answer that resolves it. The Mishnah says that if you blow into a pit, blow the shofar into a pit or a cistern, you're not yaitza, but the brisa says you are. Rav Huna like kasha. Rav Huna says there's no contradiction because kan la'imdem al svasabar. It depends if you're standing outside the pit. But if you are in the pit, then you're not hearing the echo, you're hearing the direct sound. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, some say this is Rava.
Shouldn't it be when you're in the pit you hear the sound waves, so you don't hear it directly because you hear the sound bouncing off the edge of the pit. So wouldn't it be the opposite? Or that's what I'm thinking. I don't know.
Well, you have a greater chance of hearing the sound. If you're inside the pit with them, you're going to hear the original sound wave
Point is,
before it bounces.
can you hear the echo, I guess?
You can, but the fact that you're going to hear the original sound wave, you'd say by that. The fact that you hear the echo in addition to.
Because the people on the outside of the pit are hearing the echo for sure.
Right.
But if you're on the inside, you would be also.
Because the sound is a wave, right? So
Yeah,
the ones outside the pit, they're not hearing it until after it bounces off of one of the walls that creates the echo. When you're inside the pit, you're hearing the original sound itself, and then you're also hearing the other, but that's not Makiv, because you're getting to hear, you're fulfilling by hearing the original sound wave itself before it
Okay.
bounces.
Yeah, I see. I'm just trying to understand the science.
The original Jews under the mountain there in the it was also echo of everything.
Mhm.
Echo. Straight.
The Gemara says, Kol Gadol V'lo Yosef. It was a big sound, V'lo Yosef. One touch of V'lo Yosef means that there was no echo. It was direct.
They thought the whole world.
There was no echo. Yeah, echo is when it bounces back, but the sound of
What about the rest of
the revelation went into permeated everything.
everything at once?
Yeah, so it didn't.
So
The echo is
that's
when it's
I always thought that everyone else heard it because of the echo.
It's a good question. Whether that's the whole secret about this.
Well, see, it was a good question. I
It's
just
a
didn't know
very
the
good
answer.
question.
yeah.
That was the answer.
Sure.
Amar
Great
Shama Mikzastkia Babar Mikzastkia Asvasabar. Okay, we're gonna learn this one way. Afterwards, we're gonna adjust how we understood this. Originally, we understand it like this. There's someone in the pit who's blowing the shofar. And there's a fellow that's also in the pit, but he's climbing out of the pit. So part of the shofar he hears while he's underneath the surface, and the other part he hears after he comes out. Now we said that while he's in the pit, he's yaitza. When he's out of the pit, he's not yaitza. So over here we're saying that he's yaitza. Now, mixas tkiya kaidem shiala amadashachar, mixas tkiya la'achar shiala amadashachar lo yatsa. If it's the dawn and someone's blowing the shofar, and part of the shofar, part of the sound of that tkiya was before dawn, and that's the start point. So he started a second too early, and the rest of it he heard afterwards. He says lo yatsa. Now this seems to be a contradiction, because the first one we said that when you started,
It was like a partial.
it was partial, a partial tkiya. First we said that you were yaitza. Now you're saying a partial tkiya, you're not
But
yaitza.
this is the time.
The time, you're right. Very good.
Time.
Amalei Abaya says to Rava, that's why it would make sense if it's Rava. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it could be Rabba. Abaya learned by Rabba, and he was a friend of Rava, so it could be either one. There were two versions to the Gemara, to the Maishna Hasam de Biinan Kulat Kia Bechiyuva Valeka, Achanami Biinan Kulat Kia Bechiyuva Valeka. What's the difference? You need to have the whole Tkiya Bechiyuva. It's an interesting expression.
In other words, at the time when it's high.
Yeah, I understand that, but he's asking when it's Shama Mixas Tkiya Al Sfasa Bar. What do you mean bechiyuva? He means to say bekashrusa or behechsher or something, right? Bekashrus. It's not bechiyuva. There was no obligation before. Anyway, but he's doing this comparison. He's saying that the person that heard the shofar after a muda shachar, after Alaysa shachar.
What's the hatam here?
Hasam.
Where is that? Which is it referring to?
The Alaysa shachar. That's the hasam, because Valeka. Oh.
It's got a hatam, it's got a acham. He's comparing two different cases.
Right. Right. That's going to be hard to figure out, because he's
Because that's
asking
reference
both
to a
of them.
specific case.
Right. He's saying both of them have the same issue, and one of them you yaitz and one you're not. Yeah. Let's.
In order to know which one is
We have to
understand the hatam.
Right. We have to find out when it says hacha and hasam, which one it would say first, the question one or the. Actually, it's hard to know over here because he's asking a question on both. So hachi hashta. Now like this is like 1 second. Let's take a pause.
Yeah.
Hasam Laila Lavsman Chiyuvahu Klal. Over there by the night, it wasn't a Zman Chiyuv at all, right? It was in the morning. There was no Chiyuv. Hacha bar makam Chiyuvahu Laisanindem Babar. Over here, I know it was blowing in the pit. So the tekiah was a good tekiah, especially for the people in the pit. They were actually yaitza. He happened to be out of the pit. You follow? There's a difference in the tekiah. We're looking at the actual blowing of the shofar, not so much the person that's hearing it. So when the person blew at night and then it became day, so the tekiah wasn't good because the tekiah was partially by night. The person that blew in the pit and then he went out, so the tekiah was perfectly good tekiah. He just happened to go out, but the tekiah, the sound itself was fine. L'meimra, this means to say the savaraba shama seif tekiah b'lei tchilas tekiah yatza, o memela tchilas tekiah b'lei seif tekiah yatza. Obviously, you don't have to hear the whole tekiah. You hear what's going on? You don't have to hear the whole tekiah. That's why he was yaitza. When he hears what he heard in the pit was good. So when he went out, that it got messed up.
So is there a specific shear of time that it needs to hear in order for it to be a tekiah?
Yeah.
Because it's a wave,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just a point in time. You can't just hear beep and say that that's a tekiah. It has to.
It would have to be the size of the
some-
tekiah. The size of the tekiah is supposed to be the size of the sandwich. You know, the amount of, there's a tekiah and then a tekiah.
Mhm.
What's the size of what's in the middle?
Mhm.
Whatever's in the middle is the tekiah is supposed to be
Pause.
that size.
Pause.
No, you do a tekiah, shvarim, tekiah. So the size of the tekiyahs on both hands have to be the size of the shvarim. That's how we do it for this.
And when
But is that
it's
the minimum
tekiah
shear
shul,
for him?
It's supposed to be longer.
But is that the minimum shear for him to hear in order for him to be yotze?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Okay.
So in essence, in order to know if it was yotze,
You have to hear
you
the
have
next
to hear
one.
the next one to know if it actually made it.
Yeah, but it doesn't. The person can stretch out the shvarim. He can add. I think he can add shvarim. He definitely can add truas, right? He's
Mhm.
allowed to add truas.
But
But
also the amount of time that you do the shvarim is different by each part.
right, but it would mean the size of what it's supposed to be. You know, not all the chumras that he threw in it.
Right, maybe what Yosef said, even though it sounded funny, it's actually the answer, that because the last tekiah was after this month. Therefore, you really don't have validation of the first tekiah, or let's say the shvara or chua was after this month. You really never could validate the honestly the time. In other words, that you were the first tekiah.
Once I get enough tekiah after this man, now what's enough tekiah? The size of the shvarim.
But let's say this shvara happened after this month.
The
So
shvarim
that
for sure
doesn't
has to be after this man.
So then that doesn't count. So therefore, how am I measuring the tekiah against something that doesn't count?
No, after this man means that in the right time, because we're talking about in the morning. It was too early in the morning.
Oh, the
After-
shvarim came out the right.
After this
thinking
one.
they blew
When I said after this man, so it's confusing. It
So
sounds
what
after
if
this
he
man
took
means
the
too late.
case and he blew the first one in the day, and then the shvarim and chua were being ashmoshes?
You have another problem.
But that's not.
Right. You have another problem of being a shmashas and all of that. Tashma. Hatekela techa bara la techa dose la techa pitis im kol shayfer shama yatza. Oh, you came to learn? Yeah, but they changed.
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you can learn. in the meantime.
Okay.
No.
Have a good day. Im kol shayfer shama yatza. Im kol havara shama lo yatza. If someone blows into a pit or into a cistern, and he hears the sound or he hears the echo. So it depends. If he hears the direct sound, then he's yaitza. If he hears the echo, then he's not yaitza. The Gemara has a question. According to what you're telling me, that you don't have to hear the whole sound. You can only hear half the sound, and it's also good. Why don't you yaitza with the beginning of the shofar blast before the echo gets mixed in? Let me check the air conditioning. So, yeah, the echo, there has to be a straight blast before the echo, right? And the echo is going to come a second later. So that should be enough, if it's enough, depending on the size of the trua, the tzke. So kika maraba b'tekeva ilul enafshes. Now we're changing the pshat. You ready? A brand new pshat. How were we learning this before? We were saying that I had one person in the pit blowing the shofar. Someone else was getting out of the pit. So while he's in the pit, he's yaitza. When he gets out, he's not. Okay, we're saying that's not the pshat. The pshat is that we have someone in the pit, and while he's blowing the shofar, he's coming out of the pit. The tekeya is coming out. So if that's the case, the reason why you're yaitza is because you're always yaitza. I'm yaitza with the beginning because I'm in the pit. I'm yaitza without because my shofar is not in the pit and I'm not in the pit. The new pshat. It's not that I'm hearing half the sound. We're dropping everything that we said. We were trying to answer that there's a difference. If the sound of the shofar is good enough, and by day and by night and all of that, it's a different pshat. He was in the pit, when you and the shofar are in the pit, then you're fine, because in the pit you're not hearing the echo, you're hearing the sound. Right. And when you're out of the pit, there's no echo. So it's the tekei himself. The Gemara says, if that's the case, what's the chiddush? So the Gemara says, you see, this is a Gemara thought. Maybe that would be a problem. Why? Because when you take your ear out of the pit, the shofar could still be beneath the surface line. So as you're going up, maybe the ear went out before the shofar went out. So that you're hearing the echo of the shofar. Yeah, I could have thought that that's how it would work. Kamash Malan, that we don't assume that. We say that it all came out.
Out of the pit, the ear goes out of the pit, but the shofar is still inside. So which is it now? That's a good one for you.
Now the doctor is going to tell us, but you don't only hear through the ear, you hear also through the bones.
Can we apply like a room instead of a pit? 'Cause that's what a pit is.
Yeah.
Basically.
It would be like a cave.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the last Siyum Hashas, so they were doing these articles about these people that were learning the Daf Yomi, and they had all these interesting things. But I have a friend that he goes swimming in the morning, and he does the daf with with waterproof things. It's like a suction. You put it on your thing, and you can listen while it's. So I thought they should definitely write an article. He's like the only guy that does the daf underwater. Yeah.
I do it on the treadmill.
I'm sure there's other people that do that. Underwater. Yeah. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda. I asked him if he would laminate the page and like leave it up. So when he gets to the end of the lap, he like looks up to see like at the Rashi. Amar Rav Yehuda b'sheifer shel oila la yitka b'mtaka yatsa. Okay, we have a new discussion over here. The shofar is a part of a sacrifice. There's two ways of learning this. One way of learning it is that the shofar was bought with money from a sacrifice. That's not how Rashi's learning. Rashi's learning that it was an actual sacrifice, and you cut the horn off the sacrifice. When did you cut it off? While it was alive. Your yaitza. You're not supposed to blow from it, but if you did blow from it, you're yaitza. When it comes to a shlamim, then it's different. There's two types of sacrifice. There's an oila and a shlamim. The oila is called kachi kachim. You're not allowed to have any use of the oila
Both are burnt offerings.
Yeah, no, the shlamim is not a burnt offering. The shlamim is a peace offering where it gets eaten. The difference is that there's a law called me'ila. You're not allowed to have personal use from consecrated property. And if you do, from hektish. And if you do, if someone does, then they violate me'ila. And they have to pay a special price, plus a fifth. They have to add a fifth. And there's also lashes, or there's a carbon me'ila. It's very serious.
This
Now-
is all assuming that these shofarot are taken from an animal after we sacrifice.
Well, actually, turns out
Because
that
before
we're talking
sacrifice,
about-
you wouldn't know.
so. It turns out that the oila is a kadshe kachim. It's a very holy sacrifice, and before it's sacrificed, you're not allowed to have personal use from it. The laws of me'ila apply. If someone does, he has to bring that sacrifice. The shlamim is kachikalim. If you have personal use from it, you're not allowed to, but it's not. You don't violate me'ila. So the Gemara is like a counterintuitive concept here. If you violated me'ila, then that means that you took consecrated property and you made it unconsecrated, which is a very strict prohibition. But because you did that, you're also yaitze. It became unconsecrated, you're yaitze. You have to deal with the consequence.
You have to do the consequence of taking
Of-
hekdesh and making it a chul.
Yeah, you deal with the consequence of you have to bring the sacrifice because of what you did. But what you did, you took it out of hekdesh. It becomes chulin. You have to pay for it and all of that. But by the shlamim, there is no me'ila. You weren't allowed to do it. It doesn't become chulin because it was never that holy to become. The more holy it is, the worse. Okay, so by the shlamim, if you blow from it, you're not yaitze. The Gemara says, "My time." What's the reason for this? Oila bas me'ilahi. The oila is kachi kachim, and it's eligible for me'ila. Eligible. Akivan the malba nafkala lechulin. Once there's me'ila, it goes out to being mundane. But shlamim b'lavnei me'ila nino isuru derachavu v'lei nafkala lechulin. It's always prohibited. It never becomes permitted to use, and so therefore you're not yaitze. Maskefla Rava. Rava has a question on this. Who was saying this? This is Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda is a student of Rav and Shmuel. It's interesting halacha. Rava says, Ema small. When does the me'ila take place? When you blew from the shofar. Labasa detaka. After you blew from it. Kikataka bisurataka. But the blowing was forbidden. After you used it, you made personal use out of it. We're talking about over here that while you were cutting it off, you weren't cutting it off for any personal use. It was only at the end when you decided to blow it that it was considered that you used for personal use. Yeah. So Rava's case is only going to be a question if this was the scenario. Rava argues. Rava says you're not yaitze by either of them because while you're blowing it, it's still considered hektish. Hadar Amar, then he said, changed his mind. He said, the opposite. You're yaitze by both. Why? Mitzvahs lav lehanas nitnu. The mitzvahs are not there for your own personal use. It's not considered that you're having hana. There's no violation over there. You're doing the mitzvah because Hashem said. When is it considered that you're making personal use of consecrated property of hektish? That's something that it's going to give you benefit. Over here, it's not considered that you're getting benefit. Well, I'm fulfilling the mitzvah, but that's not considered a personal benefit. That's an obligation that.
Fulfillment of the obligation.
Yeah.
So are you
According to this,
Yaitse?
yeah, you're yaitze. Amar Rav Yehuda. We have another statement from Rav Yehuda. B'sheifer shel avodah zarah lo yitka. If it belongs to avodah zarah, don't blow. The animal was used for avodah zarah. The sheifer was used for avodah zarah. You found it in a church. V'imtaka yatsa. But if you do blow from it, you are yaitze, which is very interesting. B'sheifer shel erni dachas. If it came from a city that the rule is that city needs to be destroyed, then lo yitka, you can't blow from it. Why does the city need to be destroyed because of avodah zarah? V'imtaka, but if you did blow, la yatsa, you're not yatsa. So there's a difference over here. If you find it in a church or something, it was used for avodah zara, then you are yatsa.
You say Reform Temple considered avodah
I don't want to say that.
zarah?
But if you, I hear the question now.
Yeah.
We would say that it's all tinnik shinish, but they weren't educated. At least today, that's for sure.
I have another answer. Finding it in the church, you're just being malad the kedusha using it, right? Getting it for the dakas, it's already had. One is like klipas noga, one is like the it can't go anywhere. It's already been sealed.
Interesting.
It just make it
Right. No, but let's say you know that it was used for avodah zarah. It's not just that you found it. I'm saying you saw them blowing it.
You got it from Hialeah.
Don't worry,
That's
they
right.
weren't yokes during those blows,
So that's not an excuse.
no.
So my time, what's the reason for this distinction? The Gemara says, "Irni dachas ketute mechta shiura." Very interesting halacha. When it comes to an avodah zarah, I don't have an obligation to destroy every avodah zarah that's in town. I mean, no one's allowed to worship avodah zarah, but I don't have to go into everyone's house and crack all the avodah zarahs that are there in everyone's house. But if there is an ir nidachas, then there's a halacha that it needs to be destroyed. Now, the truth is that when we came into the land of Israel, we did have an obligation to go around and destroy every place of avodah zarah that existed. But that would only be in the days of Moshe and days of Yeshua. But now, whatever is there, I mean, if it's mine, I have a problem. But I don't have to go around that and break everyone else's. So, if there's a halacha that you need to destroy it, so then it's considered as if it's destroyed, and then you don't have the shear because it's a strange way of viewing this
You
item.
can't even use it.
But I look at the item and I look at it like as if it's not here.
Mhm.
But I'm looking because it's going to be destroyed. It's halachically going to be destroyed. So therefore it's missing a shear. What is the shear? It needs to be the size of my fist to stick out. But this, because it's destroyed, the shear is chopped up. Okay. Amar Rava. Someone that a person has the ability to forbid anyone from having benefit from him. So he says, so you cannot have any benefit from me. It's like a vow that a person, just like he can make something hektish, he can make something forbidden for other people to have benefit from. So if someone says that his friend, not so much his friend, but another, cannot have any benefit from him, so mitzvah, but you could use the shofar. Or actually, we're not talking about the shofar now. We're talking about the person. The person can blow the shofar for him. Can daven for the amit, I guess. He can blow the shofar. Let's say he says that you can't have benefit from the shofar. So then, so the same thing. If it's the shofar, you can use it for the mitzvah. Rava, what's the reason? Rava, according to Rava, it's because mitzvah slabli hanisnitnu. It's not considered benefit. It's considered just fulfillment of a mitzvah, but it's not a benefit. Rav also says, if someone forbids his friend from having benefit from him, but he's allowed to sprinkle on his friend the water of the paraduma if it's in the winter. Why? Because when he's becoming pure, that's not considered having benefit. That's a mitzvah that he's doing, that he's sprinkling. But it can't be in the summer because the water may be a little cool, and in the summer he's going to appreciate, besides that it's a mitzvah, but it's also a benefit as well. Yeah. We have to discuss the hot mikveh, cold mikveh. Okay. If someone forbids benefit from the spring, but he can use it as a mikveh. In the winter when it's cold anyway, and he doesn't need it, the water to cool off. But not in the summer when he would go in there to cool off. They sent Avu Deshmol a question. It's the second time today we have Avu Deshmol. Was the first one. If he drilled a hole through the cartilage of the shofar. Kafu v'achal matzah. If a person is forced to eat matzah, yatzah, he's yatzah. Kafu man, who forced him? Ilema kafu shade. We have a very interesting example of someone that's being forced. He was actually possessed. The kafu shade here means that he's possessed, like by a demon of some sort, a dibuk. So vahatanya, how could you say this? Itim chalim v'itim shaita. If there's a person that, what would be a medical term for this? He's he every once in a while he goes crazy. Temporary insanity.
That's legal too.
Psychotic.
Saying this, or this happened to
Abu Shmuel says he's forced to eat matzah. He's yaitzer. The Gemara is now discussing how was he forced? So we're thinking that he's forced because he's possessed by a dibuk or something, and that's like forcing him to do something against his will. So the Gemara says, he quotes a brisa. It says that if someone is psychotic, every once in a while he's crazy, he's normal. So kishu chalim, when he's normal means you like everyone else. Everyone else is crazy. No. So how does that work? When he's healthy, so hareo kipikeach. Okay, the halachas apply that he's considered that he's intelligent, l'chol dvarav, and everything is good. Kishu shaita, when he's crazy, hareo kashaita l'chol dvarav. I remember this tshuva from Reb Moshe about this guy that he had to give his wife a get, but he thought he was Mashiach, and he would go around saying, is he considered normal or not? Sometimes people have these people, they think it was an interesting discussion. Anyway, over here we're saying he is sometimes crazy, sometimes not. I don't know the end of the story. I don't remember the end of the tshuva, but you know someone like that? So why are we saying that he's not yaitza, or why are we saying that he is yaitza? If he's a shaita, then he's a shaita l'chal dvarav. He didn't fulfill his obligation. Why are we saying that he's yaitza? Abu Shmuel said that if someone is forced to eat matzah, he's yaitza. He said, who forced him? He said a dibuk inside him. So we're comparing a dibuk to someone that's psychotic. So we're saying it's the same thing, right? So he was forced, and he shouldn't be yaitza. He shouldn't be yaitza. He was a shaita then. So Amaravashi shakafu parsim. Yeah, he got the story wrong. It wasn't forced because he had something inside him that was forcing him. That wasn't the Persians forced him. I would think the Bezdin forced him because he wasn't eating matzah. We were saying the Persians, but that's the same idea, right?
Is this on Pesach, by the way?
Yeah, we're talking about Pesach. Yeah, I guess I should have said that. The first night of Pesach, where he needs to eat the matzah.
So the issue was really.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, you're jumping ahead. Just 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, it has to do with if you need kavanah. Very good. Just 1 second. Amar Rava, or maybe Rabba. Rava says, Zaysei Meres, this tells me you're wondering why this is coming in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, because this was a lead up to the next case, where if someone blows the shofar because he's playing it as a song, he thinks it's a trumpet or a trombone or something, or a French horn, whatever he's playing over there, he's trying to make some sounds. He's trying to make a musical instrument, and so he's just blowing it because it sounds nice. If that's the case, if you're forced to eat matzah, and you're fulfilled the mitzvah of eating matzah, so even though you had no intention to eat the matzah, someone was forcing you, you didn't have kavanah. So too, if you're blowing the shofar to make a song, you didn't have intention for the Tkiya Shvarm Tkiya, but that there was a Tkiya Shvarm Tkiya there, so you'd be yaitza. The Gemara says, Pshita hainohach. You're telling me a chiddush. That's exactly the same thing. There's no chiddush there. So it could have said that the Torah says to eat matzah, and the fact is he ate matzah. He's not considered misasik. I mean, he didn't want to, but he did. Aval hacha, but over here, zichron shua ksiv. Over here it says it's a remembrance of the trua. He wasn't. It's not considered anything. unless it's considered a tkiya, unless it's considered true. See, there's a special halacha that if someone does something in a way of misasik means he had no intention to do this action. The action itself was unintended. He slipped on the floor, and while he was falling, he knocked into a light, and he turned it off on Shabbos or something. Yeah, that's a shaygig. He was intending to swing the axe, and it was unintentional what happened. But here, I wasn't even swinging an axe. Here, I was doing something totally different, and something happened. So here, if someone is forced to do an action that his body benefits from, eating matzah, and the other one is arayas, relations. So that's not considered misasik. There's no such thing as misasik when the body enjoys it. So here, the fact that he ate, it's not considered. The fact is he ate. Now, whatever you're going to tell me, he ate. And the Torah says to eat, and he ate. So that's why he would be yaitzer. But when it comes to the shofar, there's no real benefit that the body's getting from hearing the sounds of the shofar. So you would say, or even blowing, could say that this is different. He's misasik, that he's not yaitzer at all. And the Torah says that it has to be a remembrance, it has to be an action that's a real action that he's participating in, and he's not. There was no participation from his part.
The rulings for matzah and blowing the shofar are different.
So I could have thought, right,
benefiting.
right.
The shofar,
You're not right. There's nothing unless you're actually participating in the action. There's nothing there.
you need to have kavana.
Yeah. How can you have a zichron without kavana? Yeah.
Interesting.
So I could have thought that there should be a distinction between eating matzah and hearing the shofar. By eating matzah, I don't need kavana, and by hearing the shofar, I do need kavana. Kamash malan, that there's no difference.
And this may be true with the lulav.
Yeah, the same thing would be with the lulav. Alma kasava Rava, whatever the case is, if this is what Rav is saying, that there's no difference between matzah and shofar, obviously Rava holds mitzvah sein trichas kavana. That's the line that we were waiting for. Rava holds that mitzvahs do not require intention. It's just the action. Very non-Hasidic, right? Actually, very yes Hasidic. Depends which way you look at this. Yeah. Hasidus plays with this because on one hand, everything is the intention and it's the thought and it's not just the dry halacha. You have to have what's your motivation and kavana and all of that. On the other hand, at least in Siman Chaf, in Tanya, and then in the Rebbe's teachings, it's the action where God really is. It's it's in the physical. It's okay. So Rava says mitzvah ain't tzrichas kavana.
That's the difference between mitzvahs and tefillah.
Right.
There's some opinions here.
Esvei. Yeah, we'll go through the Gemara over here. There's a big discussion. The Gemara has a question. We have a mission in Brachas. Someone's reading the Chumash. He happens to be reading the portion that has the Shema in it. And he's just reading, and it turns out that time was exactly the time when he should be reciting the Shema. And oh, how perfect. So im kiven libay, if he has intention to fulfill the Shema while he's reading that, what happened to Baruch Shem? That's not in the. So yatsa, he's yaitza. Vim lav la yatsa, and if he doesn't have intention, he's not yaitza. My lav, is it not? Kivan libelatzis. His intention was that he had kavana to fulfill his obligation. This is a direct question on Rava. Here we're saying only if he has intention does he fulfill his mitzvah. But he was saying the Shema without intention. According to Rava, mitzvah ain't tzrichas kavana. Gemara says light. That. It's not what it's talking about, it's likris. If he intended to read it, not to have to be yaitze, he had intended just to read the Torah. It says likris. Hakakar, you told me he was reading. What are you telling me if he intends to continue reading? The Gemara says, but he wasn't really reading it. He was reading it in a way where you would edit the the cipher has to read it in a way where he can make sure every letter's there. So he would read it in a way that's not necessarily the actual sounds. So for example, maybe he would read al mazazas or something if there was no vav in the mezuzahs. So the editor reads it different to make sure the letters are there. He possibly is ignoring vowels or turning vowels into consonants to make sure that he gets every point, but he's not reading it correctly. So im kiven libai, to read it correctly, not like the Magia reads it.
It's like a literal pronunciation of letters rather than
Right.
combination of
Letters and vowels. So it would be like, sometimes these lawyers,
or
right,
whatever, he's pronouncing each consonant
right.
literally to make sure.
Sometimes you hear like the lawyers, I don't know if they still do this, but they would read and they would say like period, comma, question mark, colon. They would dictate their yeah. So that would be B'kaira Lahagia. Yeah, you do that in the text, they say.
This is maybe a good common one, so let's call it specific intent and general intent. One is intent to do the action, the other is intent to do the action for the purpose.
Right. Yeah, we're going to get into that in a moment. So what just came out of this, just 1 second, what just came out of this is you're telling me that he doesn't have specific intent to fulfill the mitzvah, but he had a general intent to do the action. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's the opposite of the crime. Yeah, 100%. Right. Yeah.
Some mitzvot specifically are associated with like Yom HaZikaron, that is a harta.
Right.
Right. Those are specifically kavanah.
Yeah,
right?
That's
because
what it seems.
Aspects of it
is the kavanah.
Is the kavanah. So how does that?
Now it comes to Shema. Yes, so that's a problem.
Right? Because you can't fulfill it if you didn't intend, because the mitzvah is
the kavanah.
The kavanah.
So yes, so that's the biggest chiddush. We asked. So the chiddush here is that even though it says Zichron Shua, which sounds like there should be like a remembrance of something, like some sort of intent, turns out Rava says no, it doesn't mean that. It just means that just to do the action. That's the big chiddush. The mitzvah saying tzrichas kavanah. Someone is passing by a shul, or his house is next to a shul. And he hears the shofar sound, or he hears the Megillah sound. If he has intent, then he's yatsa. If he doesn't have intent, we think it's referring to specific intent. Then he's not yatsa. My love, he must have intent to be yatsa. Where it says loy l'shmaya, he has to have intent to hear, not to be yatsa the mitzvah. The general intent, right? Lishmaya v'hashama. What are you saying? He has to have intent to hear, but he was listening the whole time. You told me. It says no. Savar chamar ba'almahu. What do you have in the translation? Does it say it's a donkey?
Yeah, it says donkey.
He thought it was a donkey braying. He has to have intent that it's actually hearing the sound of shofar, not that he's being yaitza the shofar. He thinks he's hearing some ensemble. Well, not for the mitzvah, but he was just, he knows that it's not a animal sound. Okay. Esvei. Where's the question? Niskaven shemeyav le niskaven mashmiya. If the one listening has intent, but the one that's making the sound doesn't have intent, or the opposite. Mashmiya v'le niskaven shemeya. The one that's making the sound has intent, but the one listening doesn't have intent. Lo yatzad sheyiskaven shemeya mashmiya. They both need to have intent. Now, this is going to be a question. You can see this coming up. If I get what's happening over there, according to you, that you're saying that you don't need specific intent, you only need general intent. So the mashmiya, the one that's making the sound, has kavana. He knows what he's doing. He's blowing the shofar. He knows what he's doing. And the shemeya doesn't have intent. Why? Because kasavar chamar ba'almo, he thinks it's an animal sound. What's your case? Where the person that's hearing it is intending to hear the sound of a shofar, and the one that's blowing it is intending to make a sound of a donkey. How's that possible? He's blowing a shofar. He knows what he's doing. Lav b'tekei l'shir. Is it not that he knows he's blowing a shofar, but he didn't have intent? He didn't have specific intent for the mitzvah. He was blowing the shofar. He thinks it sounds nice to do a tekiah shvarim tekiah. It says Dilma kamenavach nevuche. Maybe he was blowing it too short. Now, Tosfos has a problem with this. If you're blowing the sounds too short, so then it doesn't have to do with kavana. It has to do with the sounds are too short, with the sound. The Gemara says, so Tosfos says maybe what Rashi means is that he didn't intend to blow it the right size, but he ended up blowing it the right size. So his intention was to blow it too short, but he didn't. He failed at messing up. He ended up blowing the right size. So if that's the case, so he didn't even have the general intent, right? Amalei Abaya Alamayata. If that's the case, Abaya takes a twist on this, a very interesting twist. If, according to Rava, you don't need to have specific intent to fulfill the mitzvah, but you do need general intent. If that's the case, let's say someone does an Aveira. Here what we're saying is he's going to fulfill a mitzvah in a way that would be Bal Taisif, adding on to the mitzvah, or to do it in a way that's Bal Tigra. If you don't need general intent, then there's going to be a lot of prohibitions here. Elameata, if that's the case, Hayashin b'shmini b'sukkah yilke. He has a question. If someone falls asleep in his sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, he'll get malchus because he's living in a sukkah for an extra day. If you need intent to fulfill the mitzvah, so it's very simple. I'm not intending to fulfill the mitzvah. I didn't do any Aveira. Aveira here would mean you're adding on to the mitzvah of sukkah. You're adding on an extra day. But if I don't need intent to fulfill the mitzvah, then if I just randomly walk through a sukkah, and eat or sleep or something, I'll get malchus. I didn't have any intent. That's very strict. Amalai Shani Yomer, over there I say mitzvah saying over Aleim Ela Bismanan. Over there it wasn't the time of the mitzvah. So when will you violate adding on to a mitzvah?
If you make the bracha.
Okay, if you make a bracha.
Didn't make the bracha.
Yeah, but the bracha is usually not ma'at the mitzvah. So here, if you're making a bracha, then you're clearly having intent. What we're looking for is that you're going to violate it even without intent, because Rava says it's a fulfilling a mitzvah even without intent. So Abaya is saying, but because it's a day later, there's no violation of adding on to the Torah a day later. There's only a violation of adding on to the Torah at the correct time. So for example, if someone would have 5 boxes in his tefillin instead of 4, or he would have 5 species of the lulav, right? He throws in one more baby bamboo or something to the lulav. So that would be a violation if it's on Sukkot.
Right.
But to shake the lulav an extra day after Sukkot, that's not considered a violation. It has to be at the time. That's our teretz. It's not going to be a great teretz.
Make a bracha. It's like
Yeah.
vain.
Right. Then they would have a bracha issue.
Yeah.
But here we're saying that because it's nothing. It's not at the time. So it's not considered adding on to the Torah, because this is not even, it's nothing. It's not considered anything. Masav Rav Shaman Barabba. Sham Barabba has a question.
It's like eating matzah
During the year.
During the year.
Eating matzah during the year. Yeah. Minayin, like he has a question like this. Minayin lakayin sha'il leduchen shli yoymar hel v'nasli Torah shus levarach es Yisrael eisef bracha achas mishali. Kagoin Hashem alekei avisechem yesef aleichem. How do you know that a kohen that goes up to duchen, he shouldn't add his own blessings on top of the blessings that the Torah told him to say? He's supposed to say Yivrech Hashem, Yor Hashem, you're right, Yisa Hashem. He's supposed to say those 3 blessings, those 3 verses. He shouldn't add on Hashem alekei avisechem yesef aleichem. How do you know you shouldn't do that? Talmud Leimer leisisif ala davar. Don't add to the Torah. You have 613. Don't make any more. V'ahacha, according to your teretz Abaya, that you say that if it's the time of the mitzvah, then there's a violation of adding to the Torah. If it's after the time of the mitzvah, there's no violation. But given the barich lei Once you finish the blessings, then the time of the blessings are over. But nevertheless, you say that there's a violation. You see, he already said, Yivrach Hashem Yishmerecha. He did the mitzvah already. The time of the mitzvah is over, is past. Then he's going to be over. He's going to violate. If he says another blessing, Hashem Alekechem Yosef Aleichem Kechem Elef Pav, that's a violation. But 1 second, according to Abaya, once you finish the mitzvah is passed. There's no more mitzvah. So the Gemara answers, we're talking about that he was in middle. That's what the Bryce is talking about. He said, Yivrach Hashem Yishmerecha. And then he adds in Hashem Alekechem Yosef Aleichem Kechem. He adds in another blessing. The Gemara says, but that's not accurate because Vatanya Siyam, the Bryce says that he completed the blessing. He's not allowed to add. So it says Siyam Bracha Achas. What it means is he finished one of the blessings, but he still has another two. Vatanya Siyam Kol B'Chaysev. And it's not accurate. Your answer, it doesn't fit. The Bryce says he finished all the blessings. So we're left with a problem over here. So the Gemara says, Shani Hacha Kivin Dil Misrame Letzibur Achrina Hadam Mevarach Kuli Emes Maniho. What are you saying? The time of the Kayin and blessing is never passed. Because if he goes to another shul, he's supposed to go and say it again. So the fact that he adds a blessing means it's still in the time of the blessings. How do you know that this is the case? How do you know? How do we know that if the time is passed, that there's no more Bal Taisif, and if it's in the middle of the time, there still is Bal Taisif. The Tanan, we have a mission that goes like this. It says, "Hanitanim b'matana achas shenesarva b'nitanim b'matana achas." This sacrifices, the blood has to be applied to the altar. You take the blood, you sprinkle it on the altar. So some sacrifices, you just have to put one application on the altar. Some of them you have to do 2, which is 4. Some of them have to do absolutely 4. You do 4 on each of the corners. So if 2 sacrifices get mixed up, and each of them have the same type of application on the altar, so Yinasna Matana Achas, it's fine. You give it in the same one, which was only 1 application on the altar. Matan Daled b'Matan Daled. If you're supposed to do 4 applications and it gets mixed up with another sacrifice of 4 applications, no problem. Yinasna Matan Daled. Matan Daled b'Matan Achas. Oh, now you have a problem. Each one is supposed to be done differently. This one is supposed to be 4 applications. This one's supposed to be 1. So Rabbi Eliezer, Yinasna b'Matan Daled. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to do all 4. Rabbi Shua, Yinasna b'Matan Achas. Rabbi Shua says that you only do 1. It's Machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua.
What does it mean 1? Or you do
1
times
application, as opposed
that
on 1
covers
corner of the altar instead of on 4 corners of the altar, because the different sacrifices. The way it works is that a bachar or a meiser is only 1 application, but an oila or a shlamim or an asham is 4 applications, and the chatas was 2, which is 4.
Yeah.
So the different sacrifices, the blood got mixed up. So Amalei Rabbi Lezer says to Rabbi Yeshua, according to you, you're only doing 1 application. You're violating the rule of the Torah that you shall not decrease from the laws of the Torah. And it says that you should do 4, and you're only doing 1. So Amalei Rabbi Yeshua tells him back, you're adding to the Torah if you do 4. According to Rabbi Lezer, you're supposed to do 4. But one of those sacrifices was, let's say, a firstborn animal. You're supposed to only do 1, and you're doing 4. You're adding. Amalei Rabbi Lezer, Bal Taisif is only if it would be alone, and I was doing it alone. But the fact that there's another sacrifice mixed in, and I'm doing it because of the other sacrifice, I'm not adding to the Torah. Amalei Rabbi Shua, so Rabbi Shua tells him back, the fact that I'm not doing 4 and I'm only doing 1, that would only be a problem if it was alone. But because each one has asking the same question and giving the same answer that the friend could give as well. Rabbi Shua also says, when you don't give, but I didn't do an action, it's better not to do an action by not doing something. But if you do extra, then you did extra, and you also there's a prohibition. At least by me, there was no there may have been a prohibition, but at least I didn't do the action. The Gemara now asks, that was an introduction to the question. Once you do the first application, you've already fulfilled the mitzvah. In the time of that mitzvah is past. Uktani the Avar Mishum Bal Taisef. And Rabbi Shua claimed to Rabbi Eliezer that you're violating Bal Taisef by doing another application. Another 3. What do you mean? There's no more Bal Taisef, according to the way Abaya was answering. Right? Once the Rava was answering to Abaya. Once the time is passed, there's no more Bal Taisef. La Mishum Damrina, Kivin Dilam Misramle Buchachrina, Hadamazimini Kuliyam Ismani. It must be that the answer is that because if there would be another Bukhar here, I would sprinkle the next one application. So therefore, it still is considered the time. So that goes back to our answer that we gave before with Birkas Kainim. Because the Kayin would, if he would enter into another shul, he would be doing the mitzvah over there as well. So it's still considered the time. So even after you finish Birkas Kainim, you can still, if he adds another blessing, it's still considered a violation, and the answer that Rava gave would still be accurate. Mimai, how do you know that that's the pshat? Dilma Kasav Rabbi Shua mitzvahs over aleim afilu shlei bismanam. Maybe Rabbi Shua just disagrees with this whole pshat, and he holds that you violate a mitzvah, you violate Bal Taisef, even if it's not the time at all. The Gemara says, "Anan hachi kamrinan." This is what we were saying. Rav Shaman Barabba, my time Shavak Masnisin Amaisim Mi Braisa. Why does Rav Shaman ask from the Birkas Kayanim? The same question he could have asked from the Mishnah that spoke about the blood getting mixed up. We would assume that if you have a question on Abaya, on Rava, Rava's answer was that if it's not the time of the mitzvah, then there's no Bal Taisef. We have 2 questions on that. One is that we see that there's Bal Taisef by Birkas Kayanim if the Kayin adds when he's finished. And we have another question from the applications of the blood of the sacrifice, that after he's finished applying it, if he continues more, it's Bal Taisef. He could have asked from the Mishnah, which was the application of the blood. Instead, he asked from the Brisa. Why did he do that? That's what we're saying over here. My time is Shavak Masnisin, my surprise. It's better to ask from a Mishnah, which is an edited Tanaic source. Masnisin, my time alay Maisif. Why didn't he ask from the Mishnah? Because he felt that in the Mishnah, if there would be another firstborn animal that had one application, so you would do another application. That means that it's still the time of bringing karbanos. So therefore, if you continue applying this carbon itself to another corner, it's going to be Bal Taisef. So in the Brisa as well, we know the answer already. The answer is that if he would end up in another community, another shul, he would do Birkas Kainim again. The Gemara answers that something different. One second. So let's finish. The Brisa. So the Brisa, you have the same problem. So the Gemara answers, Rav Shaman Barabba Hasam Leisagid Layav, Hachi Bay Mavarach, Bay Lai Mavarach. It's a very interesting distinction. If there would be another sacrifice, you would have to apply the blood. So therefore, it's still considered the time. That's why he didn't ask from that. But if you go into another shul, the Kayin does not necessarily need to go up to Duchen again. It's his choice. So it's not necessarily still the time of Birkas Kainim. So therefore, Rav Shaman Barabba asked from the Brisa that he says, what are you telling me? That once it's finished, the time, then there's no more Bal Taisef. I have a Brisa that tells me that there is Bal Taisef, but the Brisa is if the Kayin adds another blessing afterwards. You're going to tell me that if you would go into another shul, you would have to say the Birkas Kainim, so it still is the time of Birkas Kainim. Say no, not necessarily, because if he goes into another shul, he doesn't have to say Birkas Kainim. He's allowed to, but he doesn't have to. Avram Nassim would appreciate this Gemara. It's okay. Ela Marava. So where are we holding now? I'm sorry. Okay. So we explained why Rav Shaman Bar Abba asked from there.
So are we saying in that perspective that his obligation is for himself to do the duchen as opposed to be giving it to
the community?
community?
So I think it works like this. that when he's supposed to duchen, he has obligation to duchen. But if he
for
did it-
himself or for the community.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Right? Because
not sure.
that insinuates like it's
Right.
almost like he's fulfilled his obligation. Now he
Right.
goes into the next place.
It sounds
there's
like
time,
it's a personal
not.
obligation. Yeah,
Wow. And that's like,
yeah,
he's just supposed to be the medium of deliverance.
yeah. Taisus over here sort of spells that out.
Saying, wow.
He says,
You're saying, wow.
Mashma mikan. You see Taisus, the bottom Taisus? You see over here on the bottom? Hachi by Mavarich.
Uh-huh.
It says, Mashma mikan, given the all the duchen pamachas biyoim, shum ina over ba'asei de amar lehem. Kol hayom, da kamri by Mavarich. That day, you don't violate it again. If you're supposed to bless, violate means neglect. It's not considered a neglect of a positive command. Rava Amar Lates by Kavana, Laver by Kavana. You see, Rava has a little problem over here, because what they told Rava, what Abaya tells Rava, is that if you sit in the sukkah, if you sleep in the sukkah on the 8th day, then you're gonna violate Bal Taisif, according to you, according to Rava. That's called Mitzvah Saint Tzrichas Kavana. And Abaya, Rava, they gave an answer for Rava. The answer would be that it's not the time of Bal Taisif, so don't worry about it. But now we have a problem with the answer, because we said even after the time, there still is a problem. So Rava says a different answer. So we could really get away with saying that there is no after the time, because those two cases were still the time.
Not to add.
Yeah, so Rava says like this.
Yeah.
Lot says, if you're trying to fulfill a mitzvah, loy by kavana, you don't require intention. But if it's a violation, then by kavana, that requires intent. So when you're sleeping in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, or let's say Simchas Torah, so then there's no, if you don't have intent to fulfill the mitzvah, then it's not considered a violation. Every time I put on a hat, it's a violation that the Torah tells me to wear tefillin, and I'm putting on something else. I'm putting on a hat, and now it's no. I didn't intend that I'm fulfilling some sort of mitzvah over there. Okay. V'matan damim l'Rabbi Yeshua delavar v'lei boy kavana.
So intent is important.
It turns out that Rabbi Yeshua is claiming to Rabbi Eliezer that you're violating Bal Taisif by adding an extra application of blood, even though you're not intending to fulfill the mitzvah by the bachar, by that animal. Elamarava latzis leibay kavana. Lavar bismane leibay kavana. Shle bismane by kavana. Only after the time, you don't need kavana. But in the time itself, that would be a problem, even without intent. So now it comes in very interesting. Mitzvah saint tzrichas kavana, and averis saint tzrichas kavana. But averis out of the time, if to add a mitzvah out of the time to violate Bal Taisif, that would require kavana. Amalei Reb Zeir l'shamir. Let's just finish the Mishnah. Reb Zeir says to his shamis, "Ichven li v'takali, have intent and blow the shofar for me." Alma kasaver mashmiya by kavana. Obviously, he holds that the one that's blowing has to have specific intent. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. What do you mean if you have intent to be yaitza while you're walking by the shul, or if you live near the shul, that you could be yaitza just by thinking and intending to be yaitza, but the guy in the shul that's blowing does not have intent to be yaitza you? And here, the mashmiya has to have specific intent to be mitzvah. The Gemara answers it's not a problem. The one in the shul that's blowing it is a shliach tzibur. He intends for anyone possible that would want to fulfill the obligation. Tashima, come and listen. Niskaven shmiya v'lein niskaven mashmiya, niskaven mashmiya v'lein niskaven shmiya lo yatzad niskaven shmiya mashmiya. Both the one that's blowing and the one that's listening have to have intent. If one has without the other, they're not yaitza. Katani was taught, mashmiya demya deshemeya. The one that's blowing has to have intent like the one that's listening. Now, the one that's listening He's only having intent for himself to be yaitza. He's not intending to listen for anyone else. So af mashmiya, it sounds like the one that's blowing it only has to intend for himself, because there's a comparison there. We're trying to make it parallel. We're not saying that the one that's blowing it has to intend for everyone. The one that's listening intends for himself. No. Just like the one that's listening intends for himself, the one that's blowing it intends for himself, and that's considered a general intent for the mitzvah. It doesn't have to have intent for everyone else. Ukatani, and it also says la yatza. Now here, this la yatza is problematic. So Rabbi Tzal Ranchberg on the side, he explains it like this. Explains it like this. He has two explanations. He quotes the Gra also. I don't have a Gra here on the side, but he explains it like this. It says la yatza, that he doesn't fulfill his obligation only if he didn't intend to fulfill his own mitzvah. The person that's blowing the shofar already it's satisfactory if he blows for his own mitzvah, even if he doesn't intend the other person. That's what it sounds like, because it only says la yatza if he doesn't intend to fulfill his own mitzvah. But it doesn't say la yatza if he didn't intend to fulfill the other person. Now the Gra says it differently. It doesn't say la yatzu, that they don't both fulfill it. It says la yatzu, meaning that we're talking about the person himself blowing it. Okay. So our question is that it seems like you don't need to have intention for the other person to fulfill the mitzvah. It seems like you only have to intend for you yourself to fulfill the mitzvah. Gemara says Tanaihi. This is a machlaikas. The Tanya shemei shmei l'atzmei mashmiya mashmiya lefi darkei. The one that's listening has to have intent to hear. And the one that's blowing it, it doesn't matter. He either intends for himself, it's good enough. However he's blowing. See, you don't have to intend for other people. As long as you were doing the mitzvah, that's good enough. Rabbi Yosi argues. Rabbi Yosi says, he just has to blow, because that's going to be automatic that he's doing it for the community. But if it's an individual, then he has to have intent to blow it for the other person as well. Otherwise, the other person won't be Yetzer. Okay, I guess we'll leave it here.
Great job.
Thank you.
Good day, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.